Good morning and Happy New Year. My name's Ryan and this is Tasha, and we are the follow-up coordinators for the More Than Able campaign. Just a little bit more about ourselves. I've been coming to the gathering with my wife and two kids since 2018, 2019.
Yes, and I've been here since 2017 with my husband and my two boys, and really, they grew up here. They're 6 and 8 now, and we're really excited for what the More Than Able campaign will do, including allowing more space for the Kids Club. Our job as the follow-up coordinators are to inform, involve, and inspire you over the next 3 years.
So as we stand up here today, I'm excited to share with the church that we committed $3 million for the More Than Able campaign, which is just amazing. I know, personally speaking, with my wife and I, we had a lot of conversations, a lot of prayer to come up with what we wanted to give for this. So I just want to thank each and every single one of you, because I'm sure we all went through the same thing. And it's just amazing the generosity that God has poured into this church.
Yeah, so we have already collected $400,000 in less than a month. Amen, right? So what's next? Next, we will start construction. So in March, we'll have a groundbreaking ceremony and celebration. And more to come on that.
If you didn't get a chance to commit anything for the More Than Able campaign and you'd like to, you can do that online, and there's also some envelopes in the back if you want to as well. So what's this going to look like moving forward? We're going to try to just be as transparent and keep you all engaged as we go through the changes that are coming here in the church. So we're going to have fun with it the way that we like to communicate in a gathering way, so social media, videos, coming up here and just coming up with different ways to engage with you all. So that's all for now. So next month at the Chili Bowl, we're going to have another update for you all. So until then, have a great Sunday and stay safe out there today.
Ryan and Tasha. And as I said, this is going to be a year with a lot of change and transition, and 2025 is going to force us here at the gathering to be a little bit flexible as we go through some of that. In March, we break ground and we start this building project that's going to be exciting and has lots of changes. And you can imagine there's been a lot of planning that has been a part of this. In fact, over a year we've been planning this and working on it, especially over the last few months and in the coming months, lots more. One thing, though, that I am certain of, no matter how much we plan and no matter how well we plan, this will not go according to plan. And we know that because that's just life, right? There will be interruptions, there will be surprises, some of them will be unexpected and not fun. But the reality is, and you've experienced this in your own life, whether you're planning for a building project or a vacation or just sitting down to plan your day, it doesn't matter how much you plan or how well you plan, life just doesn't go according to plan. And the reason for that is because we're people who are messed up and we make mistakes and we mess up other people's plans, but also life is unpredictable. And that's why it's comforting that in a year where we're looking at a lot of change and discomfort, it's good to remember that we serve a God whose plan never gets derailed, and that we worship a God who's always in control. And so what we're going to do this year on Sundays is we're going to focus on God's plan. Particularly, we're going to see his plan in the Old Testament. So the Bible is divided into two parts, the New Testament and the Old Testament. The New Testament is the story of Jesus and how the church grew after his life. And the Old Testament is the story that leads up to that. And what we'll discover this year as we go through the Old Testament, we're going to look at a lot of stories about people. We're going to explore the lives of the main characters of the Old Testament. And we'll see that most of them, their lives got off the rails, that most of them made bad decisions. And as a result, their lives didn't turn out the way maybe they thought they were going to. Because the Bible's a true story. And that's how life works. You see, when we align our lives with God's purposes, we will discover what life is meant to be like. We'll discover the life that we were created to live. But when we don't align our lives with God's purpose, what we do discover is that life goes off the rails. But the amazing thing in the Old Testament and throughout the Bible and throughout all of life is this. Even when our lives and our plans go a direction we didn't expect them to go, God's plan never gets derailed. And from beginning to end in the Old Testament, from Genesis to Malachi, God's plan is simple. He wants to get us to Jesus. And so even though characters like Abraham and Moses and Joseph and David and Hezekiah and Solomon and all these guys, even though they all made mistakes and they all messed up and their lives got off the rails and their plans didn't go the way they thought they were, God's plan never gets derailed. And we'll keep coming back to that over and over and over again this year. But this morning, we're going to start right at the beginning. We're going to start in Genesis 1. And the reason we're going to start here, partly because it's the beginning, but also, this is where we discover God's purpose for our lives. There's a phrase that I like to use, and if you've been here for even a short period of time, you've probably heard me say it, that one of my great desires for you is that you will experience life as God created it to be. But how do I know what that looks like if I don't know how God created it? And so Genesis 1 is the story of God's creation, and specifically, it tells us why we were created. In the early part of the chapter, it goes through the creation of nature. Right? God creates light, and he separates the sea from the sky, and he creates dry land, and he creates fishes and birds and all the land animals. And then he gets to the sixth day, and the most important creation, that's us. And so this morning, we're going to look at God's creation of humanity. Genesis chapter 1, verses 26 to 28 is where we find it. So if you have your Bible, go and turn there, or you can pull it up on your phone or your tablet, and we'll put all the words on the screen for you if you want to follow along there. This is Genesis 1:26. Then God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." The very first thing we discover in Genesis 1:26 is we discover why we have value, why people are valuable. And the reason that people are valuable is because we're made in the image of God. Every single person who has ever in all of history lived on the face of the earth is valuable. Because every single person in all of history that has ever lived on the face of the earth was made in the image of God. Now when we hear that phrase, image of God, it can mean a couple of different things. Now, one of the things that it means to us is that we are a reflection of who God is. There are things about being human that teach us about who God is. For example, this verse starts with God making a choice, doesn't it? He says, let us make. He's making a choice. We are able to make choices. We have that ability because we're made in the image of God. The reason that we are relational creatures, why relationships mean so much to us, they rule our lives, is because we were made by a relational creator. Our bodies are extraordinarily orderly, right? They work and they function in amazing ways. And the reason for that is because we were created by an orderly God. I mean, creation is incredibly orderly. We have seasons. The sun rises. I know it doesn't really. The sun rises and sets, right? 24-hour days, and it always works that way. When we eat food, it digests, it goes out, our blood pumps through the hearts, it goes to all of the places it needs to go. We have these amazing nervous systems, and I could go on and on and on, talking about things that I don't even understand. But they're so orderly because we were made by an orderly God. And so we are a reflection of God. There are things we can learn about Him simply by looking at ourselves. But it means more than that. It also means that we are representatives of God. We are designed to represent God. That's what it means to be His image bearer. Another way to think of this is like a photograph. Some of you remember photographs. Now, these days, if you want to look at a picture, you just pull out your phone and you kind of scroll through it, you find the picture you want to look at. Back in the day, like back in the 1900s, we had these things called photographs. And it was just some of you haven't seen it, it's like this shiny piece of paper that had a picture on it. And so we would carry these around with us. Like in my wallet, I would always have a picture of my wife and my kids, so at any time I could pull them out and be reminded what they looked like. That picture, that photograph, that was an image bearer of my family. Like my picture of Liam was not Liam, right? It was a representation of Liam. And it showed me who Liam was. And what this means is we are not God, right? We're the image bearers of God. We're the representation of God. And what that means is when people look at you, they should see who God is and what God is like. If you're living according to your created purpose, then you should be representing God to everyone around you. But there's more to it than that, right? There's more. This also impacts how I treat other people. Because all of the people around me are image bearers of God. Now, let's be honest. There are times when the people around you do things that you don't like. There are times when the people around you disagree with you, or contradict you, or criticize you, or do anything else that makes you feel bad. How do you respond to that? Knowing that they are an image bearer of God. You see, so there are times as a parent when your kids don't do what you want them to do. Like they move across the country, right? Or they don't call as often as they should. When my kids do things that I don't like, I don't just take their picture out and tear it up, right? Because that picture represents something to me. That picture represents them, and I love them, and because I love them, I'm not going to destroy their representation. I'm not going to destroy their image. And in the same way, just because someone around you does something that you don't like, doesn't mean that you destroy the image of God. Because when I attack other people with my words or my attitudes or my actions, I'm not just attacking them, I'm attacking the image of God. And so this founding principle at the very beginning, that God created all of us in His image, has massive ramifications for how we live our lives, doesn't it? Let me point out one more thing about what it means to be an image bearer of God. You are valuable. And you are valuable because God made you in His image. But if you seek to find your value somewhere else, you'll never find it. You see, it's really easy for me to think that I'm valuable because of what I've achieved. I've done a lot in life. I'm a pretty valuable guy, right? Or what I've accomplished, or maybe what I've accumulated, right? Look, you guys see, look at my house, look at my car, look at my golf clubs, right? I look at my dogs. I've accumulated so much. I must be pretty valuable. And often we try to find our value in the affirmation of others, don't we? Like, I feel valuable if other people think I'm valuable. Or I feel valuable if other people like me or say nice things about me or say nice things to me. Then I feel valuable. And here's the problem with all of that. It all goes away. And if my value comes from something I've achieved, do I cease to be valuable when I fail? Because I do. If my value comes from something I've accumulated, do I cease to be valuable when I lose that thing? Because I will. If I get my value from other people's affirmation, does that mean I'm no longer valuable when people don't like me? Because they won't. You see, if I don't find my value in the right place, then there will be dark times in my life when I struggle to figure out if I even am valuable. And maybe another way to look at this is to say, if you are in one of those times, and you're struggling to even wonder if you are valuable, can I suggest the place to start is to understand who you are to God. You are His beloved creation. We're going to finish by talking about how much He loved you, that He was willing to send Jesus. But He created you in His image. That's how valuable you are to Him. And when you start there, you find the truth of your value. But there's more in this verse. I feel like I'm on some infomercial. But wait, there's more! When I'm studying the Bible, one of the things I like to do is look for words that are repeated. Because oftentimes, if you're studying on your own, and you should be, if you're studying the Bible on your own, you find in a verse or a passage the same word pops up over and over again, that means something. Pay attention to it. There's something there for you to learn. And that happens here. It says, then God said, let us make man in our image after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. Do you see what's being communicated here is that God is saying, I am creating humanity over and above every other living thing. And here's another place where we get our value. We are more valuable to God than everything else in creation, because He created us over and above everything else in creation. No, real quick. I'm not going to spend a ton of time here. But this truth has implications for how we understand the origin of the species, doesn't it? We don't come from other living creatures. We were created over and above them. This also has implications for how we understand morality. The reason that humans have a different understanding of morality than animals is because we were created differently than the animals. And when we revert to animal morality, we're missing out on our created purpose. What is animal morality? They don't even have morality. Animals act on instinct, right? They do whatever. I love my dogs. They do not reason out whether something is right or wrong, right? When I say at the end of the night, hey, Miley, Roscoe, time to go outside, they don't sit there on the couch. Yeah, they're sitting on the couch watching TV is what they're doing. They don't sit on the couch and say, is it right or wrong for me to obey Dad? They call me Dad. They just do whatever they think they need to do in order to survive. That's the animal instinct. We, however, are created differently than them. We are created, and here's where we're in the image of God, with the ability to reason. The ability to ask ourselves a simple question, is this right or wrong? And so when we find ourselves in a place where we justify doing wrong because I just couldn't control myself, or I just couldn't stop, or I had to, essentially what we're doing is we're saying we're on the level of animals, unable to think for ourselves, acting only on instinct, and we are missing the point of how we were created. So this truth has really big implications for how we live out our lives. You are valuable because you're created in the image of God and because you're created above and beyond all the rest of creation. So let's keep unpacking what this means. Verse 27. So God created man in His own image. He said He was going to do it, then He did it. In the image of God, He created him, male and female, He created them. Now there's three parts to this verse. And to really grasp its full meaning, we have to take it piece by piece, okay? So first of all, God created man in His own image. So man there is humanity, right? He's not talking about Adam here. This is all of humanity, that God created all of humanity in His image. And now the next line helps us to understand the first line. It says, in the image of God, He created him. Now him is singular. And so it's talking about everybody. So all together, we are the image bearers of God. All together, we are the image of God. But now in the third line, He's going to help us understand the second line. He says this, male and female, He created them. That's plural. So what He's saying is, image of God, all of humanity, and all of humanity has two parts, two components, male and female. Now some of you guys like math. We're going to do some math, all right? This is an equation. Male plus female equals image of God. That's what these verses are teaching. Male plus female equals image of God. Now, if you understand math, you know that we can change this equation around and get a different outcome, right? So, male minus female, not the complete image of God, right? Female minus male, not the complete image of God. And again, this is a truth that has massive implications, right? Let's just unpack them a little bit if we can, all right? Number one, The only created division in humanity is the male-female division. You can read the entire Bible cover to cover, you will discover this. Nowhere is there any other division made between humans. This is the only one. There are two groups in humanity. There is male, there is female. There is not a created division among races. There is not a created division among ethnicities. There is not a created division among hair color or eye color or nationality. Now, those are all expressions of diversity within humanity. And the Bible embraces that. You look at the end, the picture of heaven at the end of all time. Every tribe, every nation, every tongue, right? All kinds of people who all are very different from each other, but all the same. They're not divided. The only division is male and female. Now, look, this is one of those places where the Bible speaks pretty clearly. And when we don't accept what the Bible says clearly, the outcome is confusion. And we live in a time where there's a lot of confusion. And ironic is not the right word, but it's the best word that I have. I think it's ironic that we live in a time and we live in a culture when the world is seeking to create divisions where God has not. And the world is trying to blur the lines that God has clearly drawn. The world tells us there are divisions racially. The world tells us there are divisions ethnically, that there are divisions between nations. The world has all of these divisions they draw. And the reason, we'll get to this in a minute, the reason is because if I can divide myself from you, I can make myself better than you, right? And I can think of myself as better than you. And so the world creates all these divisions that God has not created. And then the one clear division that God has made, the world says that one's not real. This is why we have so much confusion. This is why we have generations that are growing up now who are struggling mightily with anxiety and depression and all kinds of mental health issues. Because they cannot take what they're being taught and align it with what they know to be true about themselves. Because internally they understand how they were created. And they're being told, well, maybe it wasn't that way. And when the Bible speaks clearly, it is unkind and it is unloving of us to not speak clearly about it. So we must understand here that the Bible is drawing a distinction between male and female, but not anywhere else. However, don't miss this. The Bible is saying that male and female equally together make up the image of God. Male plus female equals image of God. And if either male or female is elevated or diminished, then the image of God is not appropriately represented. And again, we live in a world and we live in a time when there are some extreme ideas out there about male and female. On one end of the spectrum, there's this idea that we've probably all heard the terminology of toxic masculinity. Now, I understand that there are men who do bad things, right? I get that. That doesn't mean that every man is toxic. That doesn't mean that masculinity in and of itself should be rejected. In fact, it's the exact opposite. We ought to embrace the idea of masculinity because God created it. God created male and female. Masculinity and femininity, two different things, both created by God, both equally important for us to represent the image of God. And if we diminish one, we lose part of the image of God. Now, the opposite end of the extreme is just as dangerous. And this is something that's always been around, but it's gotten more momentum in recent days, and especially in the church. It's this idea that I would probably refer to as oppressive headship. It's this idea that God set up some kind of pattern where men are over women, and that all women ought to submit themselves to all men. And some even take it as far as to say that a wife can't have a relationship with God on her own. She has to go through her husband. In fact, there's a guy who very recently, who is a well-known Christian leader, who came out and said, you know what, if a husband tells his wife that she has to wear a red dress every day for the rest of her life, she is sinning if she doesn't do that. That is missing the point, and that is completely out of alignment with what Genesis 1:27 says. It is not the job of men to force women into submission. Because if we diminish one and elevate the other, we lose the image of God. Together, male and female, together we complement one another and we make up the image of God. And here's why that's important. When we say that male and female together make up the image of God, what we're saying is that humanity is a diversity with equality that is united in purpose, just like the Trinity. God is Father, Son, and Spirit. And we can't fully explain this because we're not God and we can't understand everything about God, but we can understand what He has revealed to us. And what He has revealed is you have Father, Son, and Spirit, three persons who exist as one. Three distinct persons who are united in purpose, but also united as one. So the Father is equal to the Son, and the Son is equal to the Spirit, and the Spirit is equal to the Father. But the Father is not the Son, and the Son is not the Spirit, and the Spirit is not the Father, and they all do different things. Just like the male is not the female, and the female is not the male, but the male and the female are equal and united in purpose. That's why it's so important that we get this right, because we can't represent God right if we don't get this truth right. Now here's the thing. This is not the main point of Genesis 1:27, but I think there's a really important inference that we can draw quite reasonably here. And it is this. Wherever diversity exists in humanity, equality also exists there. And unity and purpose also exists there. God created us incredibly diverse. And this is, just look around. There are so many different people with so many different attributes here. And it's not just external, it's internal, right? Our gifts are different. Our passions are different. The way we grew up is different. We're from different places with different ideas. We look different from each other. And anywhere there is diversity, there is also equality. Male and female, different, equal in the eyes of God. Blue-eyed people, brown-eyed people. Different, equal in the eyes of God. Short people, and even tall people. Equal in the eyes of God. Black, brown, white, equal in the eyes of God, right? Blonde, brunette, you draw the difference anywhere you want. We are all equal in the eyes of God. This is why racism and sexism and some forms of nationalism are so abhorrent to God, because they are a rejection of how He created us to be, and they destroy His image in those around us. So if we want to understand who we were created to be and the life that we were created to live, we must embrace these truths about who we are. We're all different from each other, but we're all equal to each other. And we ought to all be united in purpose together. And so to that end, we get to the next verse, where God is going to reveal His purpose for humanity. Verse 28, and God blessed them. And what this means is that He commissioned them, right? It's kind of the picture of a big ship that's getting ready to go out on its first voyage. And somebody takes a bottle of champagne and crashes it against the hull of the ship. And it's like, yay, okay, now it's ready to go. That's what God's doing here. He's blessing them. That's Adam and Eve. He's created male and female, and He blesses them. He commissions them. Essentially, He's saying, I've got something for you guys to do. Here's your job. And God said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it and have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the heavens and over every living thing that moves on the earth. So number one, He says to Adam and Eve, job number one, guys, make more. Make more. Why is that? Why is God's very first command to humanity, make more humans? Because we're so valuable to Him. We are the apex of His creation. We are made in His image. We are created above and over all the other pieces of creation. So He says, I want more. I love you so much. I value you so much. Make more. So Adam and Eve, your job number one is to multiply. God is a God who loves multiplication. He wants Adam and Eve to multiply. And then He says to do what? Have dominion over all of creation. And what that means really is He wants them to manage creation. I want you to take care of it. And when you pair that Pair that with who we are, right? So Adam and Eve, I want you to have dominion over creation. But remember, Adam and Eve, you're my image bearers. You're my representatives. And so how you manage creation ought to reflect the way that I would manage creation. And so it's our job to care for and to cultivate God's creation as he would do it. Here's what you were made to do. You were made to represent God to his creation. You were made to multiply God's goodness in his creation. And you were made to manage God's creation as he would. So to maybe simplify this a little bit, look, the way you live ought to make people think about God. Right? What you do ought to make the world around you better, not worse. And how you treat other people, the standards by which you live your life, ought to be the standards that God has set. That's what he's saying to Adam and Eve. And he says the same thing to us. In fact, cool thing here, God's creation in Genesis 1 is mirrored in the New Testament. Now, we're only looking at Genesis 1 today. And at the end of Genesis 1, God looks at everything. He's like, hey, this is pretty good. I did a good job. This is a good creation. But what we live in a time when we look around and say, I'm not sure that creation is still good, right? There's a lot of problems. Plans go awry. Things don't work. What happened? Well, Genesis 3 happened. All right, and we'll get there in a couple of weeks, and we'll see why the creation isn't good anymore. But because of sin, creation is no longer always good. And so the New Testament is the story of God recreating, God making all things new. In fact, John, one of the Gospels, begins with the words, in the beginning, just like Genesis. Genesis 1, in the beginning. John 1, in the beginning. Both speak about creation. And the point is this, that Jesus came to make a new creation. Now we'll experience that new creation fully at the very end, right? In Revelation, when Jesus says, behold, I am making all things new. But the new creation begins when Jesus comes to earth. And he lives and he dies and he rises again. And then he commissions his disciples to go out and live for him. And what we're going to notice here in just a second is that when Jesus commissions his disciples in Matthew 28, it looks very similar to how God commissioned Adam and Eve in Genesis 1. In fact, we call Matthew 28 the Great Commission, because here is where Jesus reveals his purpose for his disciples. And guess what? Jesus' purpose for his followers is almost identical to God's purpose for Adam and Eve. All right, so let's go to Matthew 28. Matthew 28, verse 18. Jesus says this, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go, therefore, and make disciples of all nations. So, remember what God said to Adam and Eve, right? Go make more, multiply, and do what? And fill the earth. And here Jesus says, what I've done for you guys, make more of that to all the nations. Fill the earth. See, this is God's desire for us, is to see more and more people connected to him. So when we multiply God's goodness in creation, what we're doing is we're taking the good thing that Jesus has done for us and we're doing it for others. This is why when we talk about the gathering, we say that we are a Christ-centered and grace-oriented church on a mission to connect more people to Jesus. We take that right from Matthew 28 and right from Genesis 1, that we believe God wants us to multiply in others what he has done for us. That's who we are as a church, because that's what he's called us to do. But Jesus goes on, he says, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded. So the baptism piece of that is them accepting Jesus as their Savior. That's them becoming a new creation. And the teaching to observe is where we say, look, God wants us to manage his creation as he would. And that means managing ourselves as he has commanded us to. So if I want to manage my life, I have to follow Jesus' commands. And if I want to teach you how to manage your life, I have to teach you Jesus' commands. And guess what? Jesus' commands are really simple, right? He said, look, here's my commands. Love God and love the people around you. That's it. Love God, love the people around you. You want to know what your purpose in life is? Love God and love the people around you. And here's the thing. Remember where we started. When I align my life with God's purposes, then I discover life as it was created to be. But when I align myself with other purposes, that's when life gets off the rails. So here's my big question for you this morning. Whose purposes are you pursuing? Right, well, we all would like to say that we're pursuing God's purposes with our lives, but the reality is, if we're honest with ourselves, there are many times when we don't. And I really believe that one of the greatest barriers that we face in our spiritual growth is choosing to chase our own purposes instead of the purposes of God. What are the purposes in your life? Like, why do you get up in the morning? Is it to achieve more? Is it to accomplish more? Is it to accumulate more? I got to make more money, right? Got to get more stuff. Is your purpose really just to get the approval of the people around you, to receive their affirmation? You get up and say, what can I do to make people like me? And I know we don't often think about it that way, but our actions would demonstrate otherwise. And sometimes what we can do as Christians is spend most of our time pursuing our own purposes. But hey, I go to church on Sunday, right? And I read the Bible sometimes, and I pray before meals, and I spend the rest of the time chasing my own purposes. And you wonder why your life gets off the rails. It's because you're chasing the wrong purposes. And when you're chasing the wrong purposes, you'll never discover life as it was created to be. Let me clarify this even a little bit more, okay? Are your words, attitudes, and actions making the world look more or less like God's good creation? Genesis 1 and 2, God's creation is very good. And in Genesis 3, sin wrecks it. And we have a choice every day, every minute, every moment. We have a choice whether we will make the world around us look more like the good creation or more like the sin-wrecked creation. So do the words that I use make the world around me look more like God's good creation? Like the other day when you were at that restaurant and your server wasn't very good, kind of rude, forgot some things, really slow, and the chef in the kitchen got some stuff wrong. Did the words that you use make the world look more like God's good creation? Or did the words that you chose to use look a little bit more like sin-wrecked creation? The attitude that you choose to hold on to when life doesn't go your way, when circumstances come that you don't like or didn't expect, is that attitude showing others God's good creation, or is it a reflection of sin-wrecked creation? What about the way you treat others? What about the actions in your life? Are you showing people who God is? Are you representing Him as He truly is, the good, loving Creator who values His creation? Or are your actions contributing to the sin-wrecked creation? The standard in all of this is Jesus. Because Jesus is the one who implements the new creation. And so when I think about the words that I want to use, my words should look like Jesus' words. Right? How would Jesus have responded to that server? How would Jesus have responded to that chef? How would Jesus have responded in that situation? Do you know what the answer is? Jesus would love others, even the ones who hated Him. Jesus would love others, even the ones who mistreated Him. Jesus would sacrifice for others, even the ones who killed Him. So do my words look like Jesus' words? Does my attitude look like Jesus' attitude? Do my actions, my responses, my relationships look like Jesus' actions, His responses, His relationships? Because this is the goal. The goal is to look like Jesus. Jesus is the one who perfectly lived out God's purpose in creation. He perfectly represented God. He perfectly multiplied God's goodness to those around Him. He perfectly managed His life and His interactions the way that God would do it. He is the perfect follower of God's purposes. And so if I want to follow God's purpose, I need to look like Jesus. This is where my life's object should be. It's to look like Jesus. And that's one of the reasons why we keep coming back to these tables. Is so that we can put everything else on pause for a moment and remind ourselves of who Jesus is and what he's done for us. And we want to do that this morning. We want to start this year by coming back to Jesus.